At 13 years old, Wang Chuanfu's biggest dream was simply to have a full stomach. No one could have guessed that this boy, born in a dirt-poor mountain village in China, would build a global automotive empire 3 decades later. But before he could even dream of an empire, young Wang had to face a destiny that was both cruel and bleak. The year was 1979. China was just emerging from the chaos of the Cultural Revolution. At the time, the country was a textbook definition of poverty and struggle. To give you some perspective, the US GDP per capita was 70 times that of China's. Even India was 1.5 times ahead. In Wang's world, poverty wasn't an obstacle. It was as common as the air they breathed. That same year, Wang's father passed away from cancer. For a family with 8 children, survival instantly became a desperate gamble. They were so strapped for cash that his mother had to give up his younger sister for adoption. His older brother dropped out of school to work any odd job he could find, scraping together whatever pennies he could. Under the sheer weight of survival, his 5 older sisters were married off one after another. But that was just the beginning of the long night. 2 years later, his mother, worn down by years of relentless toil, passed away. At just 15, Wang Chuanfu was officially an orphan. This was the absolute rock bottom of his life. Now back then, with his excellent grades, Wang could have enrolled in a vocational school. It was the safe bet, a guaranteed government job after graduation, and a steady ticket out of poverty. But fate had other plans. The final day of his middle school exams coincided with his mother's funeral. To see her one last time, Wang skipped 2 of his exams. His final scores were only enough to get him into a regular high school. This meant he'd have to fight 2.5 million other students for a 1 in 10 shot at a university spot. Just when he thought things couldn't get worse, life handed him another muddy, uphill battle. Even so, he was the family's only shot at an education. To beat the odds, the family had to go all in. His older brother, Wang Chuanfang, made a vow. They would provide for Chuanfu's studies, even if it cost them everything. To make it happen, his sister-in-law sold her dowry, and his brother sold the only thing he owned of any value, an old wristwatch. Every week, Wang needed 10 yuan for living expenses, about $15 in today's money. For the struggling Wang family, that was a fortune. To cover it, his brother and sister-in-law often went into debt, selling nearly everything they owned. They spent several winters shivering in a dilapidated thatched hut just to keep him in school. Years later, sitting in front of cameras as a titan of industry, Wang Chuanfu still breaks down in tears when he recalls those days. He says his brother and sister-in-law essentially sacrificed their own lives to give him a future, especially his sister-in-law, Zhang Juxiu, who married into the family when things were at their absolute worst and helped pull that crumbling household back from the brink. 3 years later, Wang Chuanfu defied the odds. Emerging from a pool of 2.5 million applicants, he scored a spot at Central South University, majoring in metallurgy. He and his family had won their high-stakes, all-or-nothing gamble. That day, his entire hometown was buzzing. In 1983, getting into college in China was a rare, monumental feat. Back then, a college degree was a golden ticket. It practically guaranteed that within 4 years, you'd become an engineer, a manager at a major enterprise, or a high-ranking city official. After years of hardship, fate was finally showing some mercy. To cover his college expenses, his brother and sister-in-law packed up and moved with him to Changsha, the city where his university was located. They set up street stalls and took on odd jobs around the campus just to keep him afloat. 4 years later, thanks to his stellar academic performance, Wang was fast-tracked into a master's program at the Beijing General Research Institute for Non-Ferrous Metals, specializing in battery research. By age 26, he had risen to become the youngest deputy director at the institute, managing hundreds of researchers. While Wang was hitting his stride, China's economic landscape was undergoing a seismic shift. In the early 1980s, the government designated a sleepy southern fishing village called Shenzhen as a special economic zone, an experimental playground for free trade and private enterprise. Almost overnight, a gold rush of risk-takers swarmed the area. By 1993, in less than a decade, Shenzhen had transformed into China's youngest, most vibrant city, minting the country's very first generation of millionaires. The Research Institute caught the wave too, setting up a state-owned enterprise in Shenzhen to sell batteries. Wang, not even 30 yet, was tapped to be the general manager. Around this time, Motorola rolled out the world's very first mobile phone, the Dynatac 8000X. When it hit the market in Shenzhen, it carried a jaw-dropping price tag of $4,000. To put that in perspective, that was equivalent to 18 years of income for an average Chinese worker. Wang happened to spot one of these devices on the streets of Shenzhen. The battery required a grueling 10-hour charge, only to deliver a measly 30 minutes of talk time. Yet, a replacement battery alone cost nearly $1,000. With his years of expertise, Wang saw right through it. The profit margins were astronomical, and from a technical standpoint, manufacturing a battery like that wasn't rocket science. In 1995, Japanese giants like Sanyo and Sony ruled the battery world, universally recognized for having the best quality. They held the patents, monopolized the materials, controlled the manufacturing processes, and sat on fat profit margins. But Wang saw the bigger picture. He knew that in the coming era, batteries would become the lifeblood of technology, powering everything from communication devices and laptops to, eventually, automobiles. The rechargeable battery market was still in its infancy, a vast untapped gold mine. Right then and there, he made up his mind to launch his own company with a simple mission: build better batteries and sell them for less. Also, in 1995, environmental regulations in Japan forced local companies to phase out nickel-cadmium battery production. Wang Chuanfu saw his window of opportunity. That same year, his cousin Lu Xiangyang, another dreamer who had come to Shenzhen to chase the gold rush, had just successfully built a major business and was sitting on millions in disposable cash. Wang went to his cousin to ask for a loan. At first, Lu said no. As a seasoned businessman, he knew the staggering risks of starting a company from scratch. But in the end, he handed over 2.5 million RMB, roughly equivalent to $2 million today. His reason was simple. Anyone who could claw their way out of the kind of crushing poverty Wang had survived had to be made of something special. He was willing to bet on the young man who had spent his entire life defying the odds. Wang knew that if he failed, he'd never be able to pay back this fortune. But if his past had taught him anything, it was that sometimes you just have to roll the dice. That February, inside a stifling, smelly chemical workshop with no air conditioning in Shenzhen, Wang and a crew of 20 workers founded BYD. Back then, rechargeable batteries were cutting-edge tech. The Japanese giants Sanyo and Sony held all the cards. They quoted him nearly $10 million for a state-of-the-art assembly line. Wang couldn't even afford a single robotic arm. If he had thrown in the towel right then, BYD wouldn't exist today. So Wang made a crazy decision. He would build his own assembly line. Charlie Munger would later praise Wang Chuanfu as a genuine engineering genius, noting that Wang could look at a part and figure out exactly how to make it. Leading his team of technicians, Wang reverse-engineered every single detail of the Japanese production lines, breaking the entire process down, from raw materials to the finished product, into dozens of individual steps. To handle these intricate steps, Sanyo and Sony relied on multi-million-dollar, fully automated robotic arms equipped with high-precision cameras and sensors. These machines could grab materials and weld them together with zero margin for error. Wang had neither the cash for robots nor the high-precision machinery to build them. So, he came up with a brilliantly simple workaround, replacing high-tech automation with human labor, using a method that was essentially a brute force hack of the manufacturing process. But there was a catch. Human hands shake, they get tired, and they couldn't come close to the precision required for battery manufacturing. He had to bridge that gap. To do this, Wang designed thousands of simple fixtures, customized molds, and positioning devices. For a step that required extreme precision, a worker just had to place the material into the mold and pull a simple lever. Boom, a high-precision component every single time. This approach weaponized China's massive labor advantage. By pairing army of workers with cheap $10 molds and only buying a handful of absolutely essential high-tech machines, BYD cobbled together a working assembly line. While it cost a Japanese company $5 to make a single battery, BYD could do it for just $1.30. Baffled by BYD's dirt-cheap costs, Japanese tech experts flew in to inspect the facility. They were shocked to see hundreds of workers packed shoulder to shoulder, assembling high-precision batteries like weavers in a textile mill. The experts were convinced that this crude, brute force method could never meet quality standards, but the lab results proved them dead wrong. BYD's batteries were just as high quality and consistent as those coming off Japan's fully automated assembly lines. Just as BYD was beginning to make a name for itself, the 1997 Asian financial crisis struck. This suffocating economic storm forced even Japan's tech giants into survival mode. Tied down by their massive investments in wildly expensive automation, many Japanese companies faced a severe cash crunch, forcing them to slash production just to keep prices afloat. But as the giants pulled back, the global telecom market exploded into a price war. Thanks to rapid tech upgrades, heavyweights like Motorola and Nokia were finally making cell phones affordable for the masses. To stay ahead of the competition, they desperately needed cheaper components. Enter BYD. Its dirt-cheap, high-quality batteries were exactly what these tech titans were looking for. Motorola dispatched an auditing team to BYD's factory for a grueling 6-month investigation. They had to ensure every single vendor met strict European standards for quality control, labor rights, and environmental impact. After testing tens of thousands of batteries, the results were undeniable. The defect rate was microscopic, and the price was simply too good to pass up. Motorola signed a massive contract. Almost immediately, Philips, Panasonic, and Nokia followed suit, locking in major deals with BYD. The financial crisis, which had brought others to their knees, became the ultimate catalyst for Wang Chuanfu's rise. By the year 2000, the global battery industry was pivoting to the lithium-ion era. Compared to old-school nickel-cadmium batteries, lithium-ion offered way higher energy density and was far more eco-friendly. But there was a catch. Manufacturing them required a strictly controlled, moisture-free dry room, as the materials were incredibly sensitive to humidity. Once again, Japanese firms had already built a fortress of patents and monopolized the equipment. A single lithium-ion production line carried a staggering $100 million price tag. And once again, Wang Chuanfu called in his tech team, bought a batch of Japan's most advanced lithium batteries, and stripped them down layer by layer in the lab. They reverse-engineered the chemical formulas and underlying physics. Since Wang couldn't afford a massive multi-million-dollar dry room, he used a localized approach, creating a dry environment only for the core steps that absolutely required it. This hyper-targeted micro-dry room saved them a fortune. Within just a few months, Wang cracked the lithium-ion code and spun up mass production. In 2002, BYD went public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The numbers Wang presented to investors absolutely blew Wall Street away. For the exact same lithium-ion production capacity that cost a Japanese company $100 million to build, BYD had done it for just $1.2 million. In less than a decade, BYD had become a titan of the industry, supplying a third of all cell phone batteries globally. If the story had ended there, it would have been a spectacular textbook success. But Wang Chuanfu's ambitions, much like the company he built, were already pivoting to a whole new chapter. In 2003, BYD dropped a bombshell: they were going to build cars. That January, Wang Chuanfu dropped $30 million to acquire a 77% stake in Qinchuan Auto, a state-owned car manufacturer on the brink of bankruptcy. With that move, BYD officially secured its license to manufacture automobiles. But to investors holding BYD stock, this was catastrophic news. By this time, BYD was a world-class titan and a darling of Wall Street. Now, a battery company wanted to flush its hard-earned profits down the drain of a completely unfamiliar industry. Investors felt utterly betrayed. Wall Street went into a selling frenzy. Within just 48 hours of the announcement, BYD's stock plummeted by 30%. Pressure from the board of directors was mounting. Yet, Wang Chuanfu was ready to bet the house, just as he had done at every major crossroads of his turbulent life. He was going to roll the dice one more time. Years later at a press conference, Wang choked up reflecting on this gamble, saying, "There were times we were terrified we'd never survive the winter." Back then, absolutely no one believed in him. To make matters worse, the Chinese automotive market at the time was a joke. Chinese cars were synonymous with junk, essentially industrial trash slapped together with scrap metal and outdated engines. Quality control was so non-existent that the exact same part on two identical models from the same factory often wouldn't even fit. Wang's logic, however, was dead simple. A future car would just be a chunk of steel with a battery inside. He knew batteries inside and out, so he figured he could nail it. But he was living in the gas-powered era of over 20 years ago. In 2004, BYD rolled out its very first car, codenamed the 394. With zero automotive experience under their belt, it was an unmitigated disaster. It was poorly put together, bloated, and looked like a cheap knockoff of a Suzuki Alto. It barely even qualified as a car. Wang knew that pushing this thing to the market would permanently torch BYD's reputation. He pulled the plug and locked the car away forever, never allowing it to see the light of day. 2 years of grueling work and nearly $30 million in R&D had produced nothing but a flop. It was a crushing blow to the ambitious company. But having learned his lesson, Wang decided to dust off the old playbook that had won him the battery market, reverse engineer, replicate, and undercut the competition. Once again, he locked his sights on the Japanese. At the time, the Toyota Corolla was a massive hit in China. BYD bought a brand new Corolla, tore it apart to study it, and unashamedly cloned its design to create the BYD F3. Toyota relied on a vast network of external suppliers, meaning every single middleman needed a profit margin. Wang took a radically different path. He bought up mold factories and set up new in-house divisions to manufacture everything from windshield wipers to dashboards. Aside from the Mitsubishi engine, which was too complex to replicate at the time, every single part of the car was built by BYD itself. This slashed costs to the bone. In 2005, the BYD F3 hit the market. While the original Toyota Corolla cost nearly $20,000 in China, this bootleg version retailed for less than half that price. For working-class families with tight budgets but a desperate desire to own a car, the BYD F3 was an offer they couldn't refuse. In its very first month, sales exploded past 30,000 units. Wang didn't just recoup the $30 million lost on the 394 project, he made it back tenfold. More importantly, he had built a massive self-reliant supply chain for auto parts, laying the bedrock for what would become a global automotive empire. By 2009, the BYD F3 had become the best-selling car in China. On the glowing recommendation of Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett dropped a massive investment, buying a 10% stake in BYD for $230 million. That same year, the Chinese government began heavily promoting its new energy vehicle strategy. Caught between these two powerful tailwinds, BYD skyrocketed to unprecedented success. The dirt-poor boy who once couldn't even fill his belly had now reached a dizzying, almost surreal peak. BYD, and Wang Chuanfu had become the stuff of legend. The media hailed him as a cross between Thomas Edison and Jack Welch, a visionary who possessed both deep technical genius and masterclass corporate management skills. But a streak of unbroken victories can blind even the sharpest minds, and Wang Chuanfu was no exception. He set a delusional sales target of 800,000 units for 2010. To hit this number, BYD launched a frantic, reckless expansion. They handed out dealership licenses like candy, often packing dozens of BYD showrooms into a single city. Dealerships were strong-armed into stockpiling massive inventory of the new F3 models, while factories scaled up in total chaos. Predictably, the wheels came off. The build quality of the new F3 was notoriously terrible. Some brand new cars were actually rusting on the lot before they could even be sold. Consumers wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. Stuck with mountains of unsellable cars, desperate dealers hit their breaking point. They mutinied, refusing to take any more deliveries. That year, BYD didn't just miss its 800,000 unit target, it failed to even match the previous year's numbers. Net profits tanked by 90% and the stock price was cut in half. Wang's fall from grace was staggering. It took just 1 year for him to go from business prodigy to industry pariah. BYD, once poised to become the crown jewel of Chinese automotive engineering, was swiftly sidelined by the market. Humiliated, Wang Chuanfu had no choice but to swallow his pride and pivot the company back to hardcore technical innovation. The days of winning by cloning and undercutting were over. The cheap price playbook had run its course. By 2010, China's booming economy had sparked an unprecedented wave of premium consumerism. Working-class families could now afford better cars. Driving a poorly made, blatant Toyota knockoff like the F3 was no longer a badge of pride, it was becoming an embarrassment. Wang knew the landscape had shifted. China was no longer the impoverished nation of his childhood, and he had to adapt. Yet one thing remained constant: his obsession with the electric vehicle dream. For the next 3 years, he focused on a painful corporate restructuring while pouring nearly every dime of available capital into developing DM hybrid technology. It was a powertrain system where the wheels were driven by electric motors and the gas engine existed purely as a generator. At the time, this tech seemed like a dead end to most industry experts, but Wang Chuanfu was dug in, waiting for his moment to strike. A whole decade flashed by, and for 10 long years, BYD just scraped by. Skeptics mocked Wang Chuanfu, laughing that he was slow-cooking his own demise by clinging to a dead-end electric dream. But Wang kept his head down, enduring the noise. He funneled every single cent he could find into EV tech, stubbornly waiting for the electric age he had envisioned. Wall Street turned its back on him. Back then, EVs were a niche, fringe industry riddled with seemingly insurmountable tech hurdles. Even Tesla, the golden child of the industry, was bleeding cash and struggling to gain any real traction during its early years in China. Then came March 2020. Wang Chuanfu stepped onto a stage and unveiled BYD's Blade battery. In a live demonstration, they conducted a nail penetration test on a standard ternary lithium battery, the industry norm at the time. The moment the steel nail pierced the shell, the battery violently exploded, erupting into a 500-degree fireball. Next, they pierced the Blade battery. The cell saw only a minor temperature rise, no smoke, no fire. Nothing. With that single test, Wang erased the industry's biggest ghost, spontaneous combustion anxiety. Following that demonstration, even Tesla lined up to buy batteries from BYD. By 2021, BYD finally rolled out its DMI super hybrid technology, a system perfected over years of R&D. It was a game changer. The gas engine ran purely as a generator while the electric motor drove the wheels, slashing fuel consumption to a staggering 3.8 liters per 100 kilometers. A single tank could take you 1,200 kilometers. Better yet, the BYD Chin, packed with this high-tech powertrain, launched at a price tag under $10,000, yet its build quality rivaled established automotive giants. It absolutely set the market on fire. BYD had officially hijacked the new energy vehicle era. The winter was over. The spring Wang had anticipated for nearly 2 decades, a future he had envisioned all the way back when he founded BYD in 1995, had finally arrived. In 2022, BYD's global sales exploded to a jaw-dropping 1.86 million vehicles, overtaking Tesla to become the world's top-selling EV manufacturer. That April, Wang made a bold decree. BYD would permanently halt production of all traditional gas-powered cars. Armed with unbeatable pricing and bulletproof reliability, BYD became the undisputed darling of Southeast Asia, Europe, and Latin America. By 2025, BYD moved a mind-blowing 4.6 million vehicles. The company that had started out bootlegging Toyotas and producing industrial junk was now the undisputed King of EVs. Now it was the competition's turn to copy BYD. Even today, BYD outspends its own net profits on R&D every single year, hoarding a war chest of nearly 50,000 patents. Against all odds, Wang Chuanfu had won his bet. Today, as the chairman of BYD, his net worth eclipses $20 billion, and it all traced back to that one simple crazy idea from his 20s. Batteries will drive cars one day. Critics will say that even with all this success, Wang is still no Elon Musk, whether in tech or in sheer wealth. But when you zoom out, it's a flawed comparison. How can you compare an orphan who grew up starving in a dirt-poor Chinese village to a kid from a Western upper-middle-class family who had a computer in his hands by age 10? Because 40 years ago, the starting line Musk was born into was a finish line most Chinese kids could only see in their dreams. After conquering the business world, Wang Chuanfu brought his older brother's family to Shenzhen. He bought 2 luxury apartments in an upscale complex, one for himself, one for his brother. They live right across the hall from each other, door to door. To this day, his brother still manages logistics for BYD, remaining Wang's strongest pillar of support. As for Lu Xiangyang, the cousin who believed in him back in 1995, that initial $2 million investment has ballooned into shares worth tens of billions of dollars, securing its place as one of the greatest investment legends in history. The helpless, starving boy who shivered in the dark winter of 1981 had finally used his brilliant mind to win his high-stakes gamble against fate. He stood at the crossroads of destiny multiple times, but every single time he chose the bravest path of all. He chose to bet on himself.